Go.
Hello, my name is Ed Peruta, and I'm the old fart that does a show on the internet called Summary Judgment. I do it with attorney Rachel M. Baird and Matt Tyszkka. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. We at the American News Media Center pay particular attention to issues that we see in the mainstream media and to topics that are brought to our attention by people who communicate with us regularly. Every Saturday between 4 and 6 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook, we open up the phones and we discuss topics. Now, what you're going to see is Rachel is very professional, Matt Tyszkka is very professional, and I'm the wild guy that they try to keep under control. But there's a lot of things in the world, there's a lot of things in this country, there's a lot of things in this state, and there's a lot of things in the towns in Connecticut that piss me off. And I found that using video and public access on cable, and now the internet, YouTube and Facebook, we can discuss a range of topics like they've never been discussed before. I'd like to thank you, the people on the other side of the camera, for tuning in. And you're going to hear me often reference the people on the other side of the camera, and that's you. There's a phone number on our logo, 860-249-1776. Please do not hesitate to interrupt us, to ask us questions, to tell us things that we may not know, because we are open-minded. We just get pissed off at a lot of things that government's doing. So, again, my name is Ed Peruta. I'm here at the Harwinton American News Media Center, and I'd like to thank you for watching our program.
Matt Tyszkka is taking some family time today.
Matt's in the middle.
So he's not joining us in the middle, but he'll be back next week. We're here every Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Join us on Monday through Thursdays from 7 to 7:30 a.m. for Ed and me on our show, The Morning Report.
And sometimes Chris Janko.
Sometimes Chris Janko on Thursdays.
Thursdays.
So Ed, Matt's not here. He usually brings a bunch of topics for us to talk about. What do you want to talk about today?
Firearm database access. I want to know if Goodwill Industries is a profit or non-profit organization.
It looks a little dark. Does it look dark to you?
Leaks from leftovers at in the federal government. State police IA reports in the Mike Picard situation. The Journal Enquirer is going to make an FOI complaint.
We're going to follow up on an issue we've been talking all week about curtilage. We're going to talk more about curtilage. But let's start off with this. It's been 10 years since we met, Ed.
Yep.
2007 we met. Before Heller, before McDonald. And both of us were drawn into firearms from separate paths, and that's how we met, through our good friend Peter Cook.
Yep.
During the past 10 years, you've told me a number of stories about your service in the Marines, about things that have happened to you in the course of your lifetime. Some of the stories you've told me more than once, fair enough. But perhaps I've told you some stories more than once,
Or I told it to you and then you heard me telling it to somebody else.
That could be true as well. Well, one story that you told me, I think you've told it to me twice, and then last night or yesterday afternoon you brought it up again. But it's a common thread that we share through just coincidence is our association with Baltimore. Now, my association with Baltimore runs pretty deep because that's where I was born, and that's where I lived, and that's where I went to school, and I graduated from a school in Baltimore and left. So it's been a while since I left, but those were my formative years. That's where I grew up, Baltimore.
My turn for a minute?
Yeah.
And for someone who has frequented Baltimore on numerous occasions.
Right.
When I met you and getting to know you and then seeing you in your various different phases. There's the court phase, the professional phase, then there's the I'm relaxed phase, and I talk differently than when you're talking to a judge or a jury. You have that Baltimore twang. And, you know, I always made the joke. They don't say Baltimore. They say Balmore. It's like a lazy Balmore. And they don't say ambulance. They say ambulance. Ambulance. And Pittsburgh has a very distinct dialect. Baltimore has a very distinct dialect. But what happened was this. I used to go to a section of Baltimore called Lansdowne. And it had Patapsco Avenue, Glen Burnie, Arbutus.
And some of those are in Anne Arundel County, just to let you know, but they're so near Baltimore.
I got thrown in a jail cell in Anne Arundel County.
Right.
By a state trooper, by a Maryland Highway Patrol.
Maryland goes by the county system.
Right. And then I realized that while I was doing all of my crazy shit on Gabe Avenue, there was a young girl going to school right down Patapsco Avenue named Rachel Ruman. And that was rather shocking, you know, to think that at one point in our lives we were that close to each other. Little did we know that our paths would cross in Connecticut regarding firearms and the law.
But these things happen. It's
right.
It's coincidental, but most people have things like this happen in their life. So that alone and by itself, okay, fun fact, interesting. But you told me a story, probably for the first time 3 or 4 years ago, about I'll call her a woman. She was 20. Who lived in Lansdowne. And you went out with her for a while, and her name was Joyce
Malecki. Now, you're right, and I don't know why it came up yesterday.
Well, we'll get to that. Let's not skip to the punchline. Let's give some background. So you told me about a girl that you dated, back in 1968, 69?
Late 68. 69. Okay. That's correct.
And her family lived in Lansdowne, and it was while you were in the Marines.
Right.
Right. And at some point you stopped dating, but you probably were still in touch to a certain extent because your best friend was going out with a girl who was her best friend.
I had a crush on my best friend's sister, Mary, as did a lot of people. Very attractive girl. And she had a best friend named Joyce. And while I was infatuated with Mary, I noticed Joyce. And a friend of the family, Joe Collins, Mary liked Joe. So...
What? Joe married Joe? I didn't understand that last sentence you just said.
So...
That didn't make sense.
All right. Mary Reynolds...
Right.
Kind of liked Joe Collins. But I liked Mary. But then I saw Joyce, and I kind of liked Joyce. So Joe started going out with Mary, and I started going out with Joyce. And beautiful girl. Friendly, smart, very family, or just she had a nice family. And what would happen was, I would drive from North Carolina to Connecticut on the weekends, and I would stop on Friday night in Baltimore, and we would party in Baltimore. The family was partiers. The kids were partiers. It was just the greatest. The whole street was made up of family members. Everybody owned a house. There was Uncle Guy, there was Uncle Ralph. I mean, they were all in the street. But I dated Joyce Malecki. And I don't want to say it was serious dating. It was, we were dating, but I was in the Marines. I was from Connecticut. And it was like when I was in Baltimore, Joyce and I were a couple. And in August, the end of August 1969, I was getting out of the Marine Corps, and Joyce and I realized that I was going up to Connecticut because I wanted to be a policeman in Connecticut, and she was living and working in Baltimore. And so we kind of, well, I'll come down every once in a while, and if you're not going out with anybody and I'm not going out with anybody, we'll go out with each other. I don't think I was thinking of engagement and marriage and whatever, but I had a lot of strong feelings for Joyce Malecki.
And then how did you find out about what happened in November?
Well, what happened was I was too young to be a policeman, so I was a police dispatcher. And I was working a night shift, day shift. I was working a night shift, but I got called into the chief's office. And this was, and I'm going to say mid-November, 3 months after I got out of the service, and I got called into the chief's office, and the chief, one of these, why don't you sit down? And he said, what? He started asking me about Baltimore. And I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what was going on. And then he told me that he had received, he had been contacted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that an individual in Baltimore had been murdered. And the first thing they do is they look at husbands, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, and whatever. And he had to tell me that Joyce Malecki had been kidnapped, taken on to Fort Meade, Maryland, a military reservation, strangled, had her throat slit, and was thrown in the Little Patuxent River.
Okay.
And they had found the body. And obviously, one of the things in law enforcement is that you look at a very defined list of possible suspects. Did Ed Peruta come down from Connecticut? Was he jealous? Was he pissed off? But at the time she was kidnapped and this happened, I was sitting at a dispatcher's desk in a police department in Connecticut and had a rock-solid alibi. Not that I needed an alibi, but, they realized it wasn't me. And I think that I don't know whether somebody called me or I told the chief. I said, well, Chief, tell him. Don't look at me. I haven't been out of the state of Connecticut. Now, but I felt terrible. I felt horrible. I knew her mother and father. I knew her family. Not close, but I knew the family. The family knew who I was. And so I got in my car and I went down to Baltimore for the funeral. And we were all at the Reynolds house getting ready to go to Joyce's funeral. Now, Joyce was going to be Mary Reynolds' maid of honor because she was getting married to Joe Collins. And I couldn't go to the funeral. I just couldn't do it. Everybody was like walking out of the house, your suit's on, your dark suit. Everybody's walking out to the cars, and, I kind of got to the stoop, out the front door, standing on the concrete top of the steps, and my feet just wouldn't move. And I said, I can't do this. I just can't do this.
And she was 20.
I was 20, she was 20. And so what I did was I had worn an E4 corporal chevron all the time in Vietnam. And it was one of the things that I brought home with me from Vietnam. I brought my boots, which I still have, and I brought this corporal chevron and a hat. And I gave it to Mary. And I said, Mary, do me a favor. I said, put this in with Joyce. Just so, I don't know, some archaeologist 1,000 years from now, or if she gets to heaven, she'll have that, whatever happens. She would have my corporal chevron with her. And life went on. I think that if you've been in combat, death doesn't affect you as seriously as other people. You just don't show it, you don't feel it, you're very cold to it, and life went on. But I was always aware of the fact that there was a girl in Baltimore, Maryland named Joyce Malecki, and when I drive through Baltimore, I think about her. If I'm down there, I'll occasionally have thoughts about her. And I just always wondered, what happened?
So yesterday she came up, and I can't remember how. Do you remember how you brought her up yesterday?
Maybe there was something on TV or the radio, and I said to her, did I ever tell you the story about Joyce Malecki in Baltimore? And I guess you had forgotten the time that I told you. You said, no way. And I told it again, and I said, oh, yeah.
Well, no, I just say that sometimes.
But then you did your typical Rachel.
What I did was I had my phone.
You did your typical
And you had told this story before, but I'd never Googled her name. So all I did was put in Joyce, and then I think I just put M.E., and her name came up. Now, that's pretty unusual if you're not a person who's on the radar, right?
Yeah.
And so I was surprised. But it's going to become obvious in a few seconds why her name popped up so quickly when all I put in was Joyce M.E. And let me tell some information, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, because I know you want to jump to the point.
I want to talk about, a couple of weeks ago I was watching a news story, but go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
So do you want to say that first? I mean...
No.
No,
because that takes away from the story.
Yeah. So... Where was I?
You Googled and her name popped up.
And when it popped up, the whole line of, links on the first page of the Google search talked about something called The Keepers, Keepers, which I've never heard of. Well, it's a series that's on Netflix, and I have Netflix, but I haven't watched it in a while. And so I clicked on what is The Keepers. And it's a documentary that's playing right now on Netflix.
A 7-series documentary.
Well, not 7 series, 7
episodes.
It's kind of being compared to that series called Making a Murderer, which really brought about some changes in the convictions and uncovered a whole lot about what was going on in that case. So it's along those same lines. So why did Joyce Malecki's name come up with regard to The Keepers? The Keepers is a 7-part series about a nun, Sister Catherine Chesnick. They call her
Chesnick or something like that.
Chesnick.
Yeah.
Cesnik.
Whatever.
Cesnik.
The nun in Baltimore.
She was murdered.
26-year-old nun in Baltimore.
On November 7th. Of 1969, and
she disappeared on November 7th, 1969.
And Joyce disappeared on
November 11th, 1969.
Okay, and so the people that are looking into Sister Kathy's death, which is unsolved, because of the similarity of the two victims.
Proximity,
proximity,
where the body was dumped, how it was dumped in the woods, off the road. Yeah.
They're also looking into Joyce Malecki's death. And so Joyce Malecki's name is very much on the radar now, and that's why it came up.
They had both gone shopping at a shopping center.
Not the same one.
Nope. They had both been driving their cars. Their cars were recovered. Their bodies were found about 75 feet off the road. Both of them were like 75 feet off the road. And it was funny because when I tell the story, they found Joyce and her hands were tied behind her back and her neck had been slit. And in the beginning of The Keepers, somebody was talking about she was strangled, you know. And I said, And then later on when we were watching one of the episodes, her brother said her throat was slit. So I'm going to go with my memory because it really, I got to tell you, November, December, January 1969-70, that was a very strange period of time, given what had happened in Baltimore.
So you had a connection to Joyce Malecki, whose name is now in the news, or on the radar, I should say, because of this show, this Netflix series called The Keepers. And Sister Catherine Cesnik, Sister Kathy, who was
Cesnik,
who was only 26 at the time, was a teacher at a school called Archbishop Keogh High School. And I started watching the first episode today because I was interested in Joyce Malecki, because you knew her and I wanted to watch it. Although the show really is focused on Sister Kathy's death, Joyce Malecki's kind of brought into it because they think, I think there's suspicion the same person did it. And then I'm starting to watch it and I see my old high school in this, in the video.
Okay, now let me...
And it turns out...
Now let me say what I was going to say before, but it would have ruined it.
And it turns out that Sister Kathy was a teacher at my high school, and that's why that
nun
was a nun
and a teacher at a girls' Catholic high school.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I am a news junkie. I watch the news. I read the news. I watch the news. I listen to the news. Within the last couple of months, if not the last month, there was a story, and it could have been on the evening news, that they were exhuming a priest's body, a deceased priest's body, in Baltimore, to try and get a DNA sample to compare against some DNA that may have been at the nun's crime scene, or on the nun, or on Joyce. But they're trying to... They believe that these two homicides could have been the subject of a cover-up as to who did it. And, like, everybody dropped the ball, everybody walked away from it. That's the impression I'm getting from watching the first two episodes is, you know, now I have to tell you, I can close my eyes and I can see Joyce, but I never really paid attention to what her brothers looked like. But to see her brothers... 3 of them are in the show. To see her brothers talking in 2017, and, you know I don't look the same as I did when I was 20. Nope. They don't look the same as they did when they were in their 20s. And, you know, there's part of me, and trust me, I know how to get a message to the Malecki family. and just tell them, say, look, I just want you to know something. You know, I've never forgotten Joyce. You know, and I think that they need to know that I understand what they're going through as a family. They've never had the closure they needed. I don't think this sounds cold. I think that the distance between Connecticut and Baltimore prevented me from having the same emotional issues that the family may have had. In other words, I think if I lived in a neighborhood, I'd be looking over my shoulder and looking all over the place for who did this to Joyce. But the distance kind of let me accept it a little bit more because there was distance. But I closed my eyes. I could see Joyce. I mean, I saw that picture on TV. You know, they've got her it looks like her high school picture. And I'm sitting there, boy, did that bring back memories.
But let's get back more to the coincidence factor of it, because I think that's probably the point of this. Is I believe that they suspect the priest.
I believe that they suspect.
They're exhuming his body. If you watch the trailer, they're kind of talking about how Maryland is a very Catholic state, which it is, and how the church may have been involved in trying to cover up that this priest may have been involved in some sexual abuse at the school. I think we're going to get into that in the next episode. And it sounds like at some point this priest he fled. And then when he came back, it looks like he died in 2001. But the coincidence of us being associated with Baltimore, I mean, me growing up there, then meeting you in Connecticut, and you kind of know the area I grew up in, and then this woman that you've talked about for years now, who died, was murdered in Baltimore. It turns out that somebody who taught at my school, a nun, was probably murdered by the same person, and a priest who was at my school may have been involved in it. So I don't know. It's just I don't know. I just when I'm watching the show, it's disturbing. It's disturbing for a number of reasons, because of what happened, but also because I'm closely related to the scenes that they're showing and the locations where things happened, and it just brings back a lot. I'm sure you feel that way too. But anyway, I recommend the show, even if you're not associated with Baltimore, and even if you don't know anybody involved. It looks like it's a really good show, and maybe I'm the last one to hear about it. Maybe everybody out there knows about it already. I don't know.
I'll tell you this. You know, I mean, I'm 68 years old, and there's people that say that I should write a book, because I will tell you, truth is stranger than fiction.
Well, how about this one? Let's bring this one up since we're on the subject. My mother grew up in a town near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Johnstown, and she would walk.
Very famous town.
And she would walk to school with a girlfriend in 1951, 1952. And then my mom graduated in 52, went off to the military, never went back there to live, ended up living in Maryland, obviously, and didn't keep in touch with any friends from high school.
That was your mother's best friend.
Yeah. They used to trade clothes on the, at the house before they went to school. They change and trade clothes and things like that. And so my mom ends up moving to Connecticut because when she retires, she comes up, lives with me.
Very prominent zip code.
Mm-hmm. And when you do that, it interrupts my flow of story. I forgot what I was going to say.
Your mother came up to Connecticut and was residing with you in Connecticut.
Right, okay.
Never looking back to Johnstown.
No, I mean, went back to visit her
Knew where she
relatives
came from,
stuff,
but yeah, you don't look back.
But not high school friends or anything like that. And so, at her funeral, a woman was there. And it turned out to be the woman. It turned out to be her best friend from high school that she hadn't spoken to since 1952 in Johnstown, who it turns out has been living in Torrington,
3 miles away.
3 miles away for I forget how many years. A long time, like
Long
20
time.
years.
Well, for probably all the time your mother was in her zip code, and the next zip code was her childhood best friend.
And they didn't know it.
And they didn't know it.
Yeah.
And they didn't know
So
it.
these things happen.
And I said to you in the in what we could refer to as
the
as a
reason the
green-
woman knew to come to the funeral, obviously, was the obituary. She had looked at the obituary, and the picture I'd put in there was a picture of a younger, when my mom was younger, and she said she looked and recognized her right away.
I've seen a picture of your mother sitting on the hood of that car.
Oh, that's what they did in the 50s.
She was showing a lot of leg.
Good for her.
But I had said to you in the green, what we refer to as the green room, the cushiony chair room. I said, how many people do you know that have been murdered? And you said, none.
Alive or dead?
Well, people who have been made dead.
Okay.
Made dead.
No, I mean, none that I know of.
Okay, now, I guess if you live in the inner city and you're a member of a street gang,
Yes.
you're going to know a lot of your friends. You're going to go do a lot of funeral activity, okay? But your normal run-of-the-mill, how many people do you know have been killed? Well, I went to school with a kid named Joey Scanlon. And I had an issue with Joey Scanlon in the early 70s where he and I had a falling out. And I always wondered, that thing, a bad penny always rolls back home or something, a bad penny always comes back. I always kept saying to myself, I said, I'm surprised I haven't heard about Joey Scanlon. I said, if anybody was going to resurface in my life, it would be Joey Scanlon, because we really had some issues at the end. And one day, I decided to Google his name. Well, Joey Scanlon is the first homicide victim in the state of Rhode Island where they brought people to trial without a body. They tried him.
So he may still be alive.
They tried him. They went on trial for killing Joey Scanlon. Joey Scanlon always wanted to be a gangster, wanted to be a mobster, wanted to, but the problem was he was a rat, and he was a stab you in the back kind of guy. He wasn't straight up and loyal. Well, evidently he was over in Providence playing with the Providence mob in Patriarcha territory, and he must have shit on two guys or did something. They brought him into a room, and they killed him right in the room in front of his pregnant girlfriend, wrapped him in some plastic, took him out, dug a hole 20 feet deep, put him at the bottom of it, and just left him there. In like 1975. The suspects went on trial. They were convicted. The convictions were overturned, I believe, by either the Rhode Island Supreme Court or the United States Supreme Court. And the suspects were now elderly. One had died, one had terminal cancer. So somebody from the state police went to them and said, look, you're dying. You can't be tried again. Where's the body? And the guy told them where the body was, and they dug down and they found Joey Scanlon's remains. And I sat there.
And that's in Rhode Island or Connecticut?
It's in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I said, well, that's probably how I thought it would end up. Joey Scanlon, you had to know Joey Scanlon to know that's how he would end up, because he was a disloyal, stab you in the back rat. And you can't have those three characteristics if you want to hang around with the kind of people he wanted to associate with.
Oh, let me give you a test then. Let's switch subjects. We spent 30 minutes on reminiscing and looking at life's coincidences. Let me test you on what we've been looking at this week in terms of Fourth Amendment law. You ready?
Right.
What are the 4 factors that courts take into consideration when determining if the area outside your house is protected under the Fourth Amendment?
Proximity to the home, distance from the residence, the physical residence.
Closer to the residence, the better.
Yep.
Okay.
Use of the property.
Do you have cookouts? Do you go swimming? Do you have a garden?
Whether or not steps have been taken to segregate the property from other, like a perimeter fence.
Fencing's good. Enclosures.
And whether or not it's in plain view.
Visible.
Visibility. Those are the 4 factors.
What do you do to make it not visible, to make it more private?
Put up a stockade fence.
Yeah, you could
so
do
people
that.
can't see onto your property to see what's going on your property.
Mm-hmm.
That implies the privacy that you demand.
Right. So the home is the
Put an anti-aircraft gun in the backyard of your house, so if anybody flies over or a drone flies over, you can take it out and shoot it down.
I don't think that counts.
No?
No.
Oh. Well, see, I was thinking like Joey Scanlon.
So good job, Ed. And when I was doing my research this week on that Fourth Amendment curtilage issue, I ran across a quote from now Justice Neil Gorsuch.
A dissenting, not part of the majority vote.
Yeah, I mean, he was on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals out in Colorado. Now, why did you want to know, Ed?
Goodwill?
Yeah, what?
Just ask Google, is Goodwill a profit or non-profit organization?
Now, am I the Google expert now?
Yes, you are.
Right, because I was talking about looking up.
Because I had heard that Goodwill Industries is not a charitable organization or tax deductible.
It's not a 501c3.
I don't think it is.
I find that hard to believe because people do their community service there all the time.
I understand that, but I'm just asking, is Goodwill Industries?
Just looking at it briefly, it looks like it does.
It is?
Yeah, Goodwill's it's a 510c3. Is that a mistake? What the heck's a 510c3? Okay, I'm not going to go by that website.
Now you're getting into the rabbit hole.
Well, it's not a rabbit hole.
Well, I had heard that the Goodwill Industries is a for-profit organization.
I got to tell you, it's not an easy question because I don't know what a 510c3 organization is. I know what a 501c3
Okay,
is.
well, I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
I have a collection of VHS tapes that I would like to, and I have some high 8 tapes too. This whatever, 8mm tapes that I would like to transfer from tape to digital, and I can do it right here in the studio. But I have to find a VCR to play a VHS tape.
Yeah, I think Goodwill's a 501c3. I think that was just a mistake in that one website, 510c3.
Okay, so I went to the Goodwill store in Torrington this morning.
Yep.
And I purchased a used Toshiba VCR. I went up to and it was only $6. $6.38 with tax. And the lady asked me, would you like to round up?
One of them probably was mine because I think I gave away about 8 of them when they went out.
Would you like to round up to donate to whatever? I said, absolutely. So make it 7. Gave it 20, got 13 back. And she said, no, we have a 2-day return policy. So I brought it over here. I plugged it in. And I have a tape that's called CRM 1998. And it's a videotape that I shot at the motocross track in 1998. What's that, 19 years ago?
Yes.
And the VCR ate the tape.
Oh man,
The VCR.
that's terrible.
Ate the tape.
Oh.
Broke the.
Oh, Ed.
You can get it fixed, but it broke the tape.
Oh,
So and it won't play.
yeah.
So I put it in the car. I drive back to Goodwill, and I'm looking on the shelf for another one. But now I bring a tape with me
To test
to
it.
see if it goes in, plays, and comes out.
Good idea.
So they have this electronic testing area. So I put the VCR up on there, I plug it in, powers up, put the tape in it, tape goes in, tape sits down, I hit play. Doesn't play. I hit eject, tape won't come out. The tape won't come out of the VCR.
That happened at the store?
Right at the store with the second VCR.
Oh, God.
So
Oh, God.
I asked the guy, one of the guys, there's probably a volunteer or something there. I said, can you find me a Phillips head screwdriver? I said, I ain't giving up my tape. So he got me a Phillips head, and I literally...
Well, you could buy the machine.
I literally disassembled the VCR on the table, took the basket out, got my tape out. Now I got my tape. And so the guy says, well, we have another one.
When did this happen? Today?
Yeah. I was holding it as a surprise. 'Cause I didn't
Oh,
tell you
it's a
about
surprise.
this. I didn't tell you about this.
No.
So now, and the second one that I took apart was a $6 VCR. And when the guy was watching me take it apart, he goes, yeah, he says, they plug it in and hit power. If it lights up, they say it works. I said, well, it doesn't work that way. You got to know that it works. So now he takes the VCR, we go up to the front, it goes in, I hit play, and I can see it on a monitor. Now we got a monitor hooked up to it. And it ejects. Now they want $10 for this one, okay? $4 more than the other two. So the one that works has a premium of an extra $4. So...
That's a lot. I got to tell you, that's a lot. $10?
So I said, right, so I said to the woman, because when I walked in, I put one on the counter, so I'll leave this here until I go find another one. I said, can we just call this an even trade, and I can just walk out of here? And she says, no, we can't do that. I don't have the authority to do that. You have to talk to the manager. I got to talk to the manager.
And after you round it up, too. You know?
So,
after you round
the
it up.
manager comes over. And I told him, I said, look, you know, I came in here, I bought a tape. I bought a VCR. I said, took it back, and it ate my tape.
And all the time.
I said, I came over here. I said, I tried to get another one. I couldn't get my tape out. I said, but this one works. But I don't want to, you know, those two are each $6. This is $10. Can we just call it a day and I can go home? He says, oh, no. We have to have the extra $4. I said, really? You're the manager? He goes, yeah. I said, I want to be compensated for my tape. I said, and it's just not a tape. It's a tape from 1998. It's worth money. It's got value. I said, if you can't negotiate to let me walk out of here with this and eat the $4, I said, no problem. And he's sitting there saying something. I says, you know, I just want you to remember this. This is all over $4.
And if I were him, I'd say, sir, if it's that valuable and sentimental and irreplaceable of a tape, why are you not going, for example, to that gentleman in Kensington who specializes in restoration, and instead you're coming to the Goodwill and paying $6 for a piece of machinery? That would be what I would say.
Listen, you know something? You're absolutely correct. But let me tell you, when a business puts an item up on a shelf, the implication is that they have screened that item functions properly, and it can go out the door and work. Not 1, 2 out of 3. You know, and so I'm sitting back saying to myself...
So what happened? What's the status of the controversy?
I did not take the $10 VCR. and then I wanted my money back, and he goes, we only give store credits.
Oh.
And
she said it was a refund.
And I said to him, I said, let me tell you something right now. I said, I'm walking out of here with a $20 bill. And he kind of looks and he goes, $20? I said, right. I said, see that woman over there? When she asked me, would you consider rounding up to donate? I had no problem saying, yeah, take my extra 42 cents. Round up 62 cents, whatever. Round up, put it in a jar, help somebody out with it. No problem. I said, but now I want what I came in here with. I said, and we're still not even. I've lost a tape.
So where does the $20 figure come from?
I gave them $20 when I bought the $6 machine.
Oh, you gave them?
They gave me change.
Oh.
They gave me $13 because the $6 plus tax
right.
rounded up to $7.
Right. So why do you want 20?
So I gave him the 13. He gave me a 20. Just all you got to know is this. All you got to know is this. I got half of mine.
That made no sense.
I got half of mine to take Goodwill.
Obviously.
To take Goodwill Torrington to small claims court. Okay? Because I'm sitting there going.
Which, by the way, is being decentralized in October. They used to have a small claims court in every courthouse, and then they centralized it like maybe 8 years ago, and now they're decentralizing it again. Just to let you know that.
Well, because I'm sitting there saying, boy, that's an unfair trade practice. You know, putting shit up on a shelf that's not been tested. You know, you're selling.
Well, how about the controversy that I have with my copier? When I got my copier...
It's over there in the corner.
I don't use it anymore. When I got my copier, I signed a contract that said I could only make 100,000 copies over the course of 4 years, or for each copy after that, I'd have to pay 8.5 cents a page. And that's written out in the block. And then there's another block over here that says prints. And there's no limit on prints. There's nothing put in there. There's no contract. Well, I call it a copier, but it's a multifunction machine. It's a printer, copier, fax machine, scanner. I think that's all it does. It's fancy. It's one of these big ones. It's one of these big ones that you pay. Well, I won't even get into that. So it got to be a couple years in, and I said, wow, we are making a lot of copies here. I'm going to go over. I can see where I'm going to go over. So we had a team meeting, an office meeting, and I said, from now on, we're not going to copy as much. We're going to scan things in and then print them out. Right?
No. No. You read the contract.
Right.
And saw the difference between copies of a document and printed documents.
Right.
And if you look at the agreement,
right,
you're going to pay if you go over 100,000 copies, but you do not get charged for any prints.
Right.
Okay.
So how do you get around that? You don't make copies anymore.
We didn't have to get around it. We were never going to exceed 100,000 copies.
Well, the company is saying we are because they're saying that prints are the same as copies, okay? So we were making copies. If we had continued at the same rate without changing our practice, we definitely would have went over 100,000 copies. Well, maybe.
I don't think so.
I see what you mean.
I don't
think so. But out of sheer caution...
There was never a conscious decision in this office to do it one way to not do it another way.
There absolutely was.
No, what it was
Patty, I discussed it with her. Why do we scan things in? Instead of copying a document, we scan it in and then print it. That's what we do.
Okay.
So the company says to me, because of course they charge me.
Oh.
I tell them, I said, I reviewed this contract. And they said, oh, we've never had anybody say that before. And I'm like, okay. It's a copier, not a printer, so that's why we didn't fill out the print
What's the name
side.
of that company?
Office Works. They're in
Office Works
Manchester.
in Plainville, I think.
Oh, okay. So I said, but there's a section on the contract for prints, and there's a section for copies. Oh, well, that's because we use the same contract for everything. Well, why is that a copier?
Put a line through with NA, not applicable.
Why is it a copier? It's a multifunction machine. Why is its ability to copy more important than its ability to print or scan or fax? To me, they're all equal. You can't delegate the functions of a multifunction machine. You can't create a hierarchy. All right? They're all equal. All 4 functions are equal. Equality for functions, Ed.
So they leased you the printer, and then they, from a leasing company in Pennsylvania, who has a provision that says under no circumstances, under any circumstances, can you cancel this lease.
So you know what? I read a contract and I go by it. So even though I put that thing in the corner and I'm not using it because I'm in a controversy with Office Works, I am still paying my $170 a month to DeLod and Laga, whatever that company is, in Pennsylvania, because you know what? I signed a contract. I signed a contract and said no matter what happened, they would get their money. So
here's
I'm paying
what
them.
Office Works did. They added up all of the lease payments and came to one number for the entire period and had it financed by a company in Pennsylvania.
DeLod and Laga.
So that company gave Office Works their money. They're going to get profit on the interest, and they're going to get their money. Okay? And Office Works is going to make money by you going over the 100,000. And what really blew it out of proportion was they sent a bill to the office for overage. And once we looked at we were aware of what was coming. We looked at it and said, but we're not over. Because you're adding prints to copies to go over 100.
You're saying within copies is a subset of prints. I read the contract. That's not true because they have little boxes that delineate them. So anyway, that's another controversy we're dealing with right now, Ed. So let me read this quote back to curtilage from Justice Gorsuch when he was only an appellate court judge for the 10th Circuit. Now, we've talked about this issue before on the show, and I always bring up Chief Riddick from Waterbury because he made this statement about a year ago when they were having some confrontations in Waterbury. He said, listen, people, if the police come to your door, if they want to search, just let them. Consent. And then go to court and make it right there. The problem is, once you consent, you've given up any right to make it right anywhere. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, when did we do that deposition of Detective Mattson?
Back in February, maybe?
I think it was March 2016.
It was winter because the trees were bare out the window.
She said that in her then 15 years, she must have had more time. She must have had more time. What?
Let me say. In Barbara Mattson's deposition, under oath, when questioned by Attorney Baird, literally said that she always just walks up, knocks on the door, asks permission to enter, and she's never been refused.
Never had to do a warrant to get into somebody's house.
Now, as we're...
Everybody just always waves her in.
When you take a deposition in March, you may forget about certain things that were said until you review the transcript or you watch the videotape, because we do video depositions. And it was only as part of your research, you found a dissenting quote by a now Associate Supreme Court Justice. And he was in the losing side of the issue in the 10th Circuit.
He dissented.
But now he's on the Supreme Court. And he said something that when he said it, he never realized what Barbara Mattson was going to say in his sworn deposition. But it confirms everything that he's saying as when he was a member of the 10th Circuit. Now, remember, Barbara Mattson under oath said, I've never been refused entry when I demanded to go in somebody's house. Never. She's in the firearms unit. Now,
during Mattson's 15 years with the Connecticut State Police, why 15 years? It was only 15 years. She's retired. Maybe that's a typo. She has...
No, she's been in the firearms unit for 15 years.
Okay.
She's been a trooper longer than that.
She has, according to her quote, always been let in, unquote. And I thought I had more quotes about that, Ed, but maybe I did not include that in the memo. So this is what Justice Gorsuch, now Justice Gorsuch, said. In United States v. Carlos, C-A-R-L-O-S-S. This is a 2016 decision. It involves an incident where the police go and knock on a door, and when the person tries to suppress evidence that the police gathered while they were in his house, the police claim that there was consent for entry, which is an exception to the requirement that the police have a warrant when they enter your house. And this is what now Justice Gorsuch had to say in that case about the whole knock and talk approach, as he calls it. So, quoting, "The knock and talk has won a prominent place in today's legal lexicon. The term is used to describe situations in which police officers approach a home, knock at the front door, and seek to engage the homeowner in conversation and win permission to search inside. Because everything happens with the homeowner's consent, the theory goes, a warrant isn't needed." So, unquote. So I'm going to break away for a minute. So if the police come to your house and get you to consent for them to come in, they do not have to go through the trouble of drafting a warrant, taking it to a judge, getting it signed, coming to your house, executing the warrant. They can just skip all that work of doing the warrant if they can get you to consent. Now, there's a lot of incentive for them to get you to consent.
There's a phrase that everybody needs to keep in their mind. That is called the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance. Policeman doesn't want to do the work, so they're just going to go and knock on the door. And I'll tell you right now, whether you get permission or don't get permission, the police report's going to say permission was given.
Well, that's the thing. What is consent? And when you go to court and you say you didn't consent and the police officer says you did, who do you think wins?
The guy with the guns.
The guy that nobody can afford to call a liar, except, to a certain extent, Judge Underhill down in Bridgeport, and we'll get to that, because that's a whole nother case. So continuing, quoting. Oh, am I waking somebody up? There we go.
She's going home with me tonight.
She's going home with me.
Going home with me tonight.
So continuing to quote from now Justice Gorsuch on this case when he was in the 10th Circuit. Quote, "After all, the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches, and consensual searches are rarely that. No doubt for just this reason, law enforcement has found the knock and talk an increasingly attractive investigative tool and published cases approving knock and talks have grown legion. But in the constant competition between constable and quarry, officers sometimes use knock and talks in ways that test the boundaries of the consent on which they depend.
Now say that repeat that between the constable and the quarry.
Beautiful.
They often use techniques that test the boundaries.
But in the constant competition between constable and quarry, officers sometimes use knock and talks in ways that test the boundaries of the consent on which they depend. He's calling them out. He's saying what you're calling consent really isn't consent. It's more like 5 people with guns and uniforms showing up at your door, acting like if you don't let them in, you're some kind of big criminal and have something to hide. And most people do not have the wherewithal to stand up to that.
I'll give you a better one. 5 policemen show up at your front door. They're all armed. Your house is surrounded by another group of officers, so you can't leave.
How is that consent?
And they say,
how is that consent?
Will you let us in? Would you please let us in to search your home? And if the man in the doorway says no, the next statement is this: okay, but when we get the warrant, we are going to tear your house apart from one end to the other.
You know what?
You can either cooperate with us or we'll do it our way.
Hey, you know what? There should be a new rule that if a police officer wants to claim that it's a consensual entry, then they should have to call you on the freaking phone ahead of time and say, we are coming over and want to go in your house. Do you consent? And if somebody consents over the phone, to me, it's a lot more valid. And you know what? I think some people would. I think people would do that.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people would say, let me get back to you. Let me talk to somebody. I don't understand.
Let me call a lawyer.
But when you're in your house and they show up at your door staring at you there, to me, that is by definition not consent.
Well, now, you have to understand something.
There are people that can't even say no to Girl Scouts trying to sell cookies at their door, let alone people with guns.
And I love to do this. I watch these shows on History or American Heroes Channel. It's called Ancient Aliens. And here's what they do. They say, why is it that in China, in Egypt, and in South America, people built pyramids? You know, the shape of the building was a pyramid out of stone. So they say, why did all 3 ancient cultures pick pyramids? That's a common denominator. That's a common factor. Like the Aztecs didn't know that the Egyptians were building pyramids, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So there are some common factors that I have heard since being involved with you here in this law firm.
That's for me.
In this law firm. And it goes like this. We are literally going to tear your house apart if you don't give us permission. Okay? Or when they say, we want you to volunteer to go to the emergency room. If you don't, we're going to drag you out of the house and force you to go. You know, so you sit there and you have to make this decision. I want to somehow preserve the integrity of my home, and I don't want them ripping the sheetrock off and ripping up the carpets.
If you don't give us your guns, we're going to get tow truck. We're going to get a tow truck and wheel out your entire, gun safe and everything else.
Drag it right through the front door.
Yep.
Because technically, when a law enforcement agency has a search warrant, they can take the kitchen cabinets off the walls looking. There's no restriction.
Why is it when people plead guilty in court, the court says you have a right to a trial, you're giving up your right to defend yourself? When police officers come to the door to get consent, there should be a requirement. Well, first of all, they should have to phone first if they want to claim consent later. But once they go there, they should say, you have the right not to let us in. You don't have to consent to let us in. Your house is protected by the Fourth Amendment. You have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your house. We don't have a warrant. We don't have authority to come in. You don't have to consent. They should have to read like a Miranda type of card to people when they're at their door.
And when the homeowner, and I've had these situations, when the homeowner says, fine, but I want to record everything that you're doing while you're searching. No, you have to leave the house. So you don't get to document exactly what they're doing. Okay? But what I'm saying is, it's that common denominator that Johnny Jones in northwestern Connecticut has no idea that Susie Smith in southeastern Connecticut, you have similar situations, and the techniques used at the door by government are the same. It's pyramids. They learn how to do it.
Yeah, and that's what Justice Gorsuch says in this case. No doubt, for just this reason, law enforcement has found the knock and talk an increasingly attractive investigative tool. And here's the key. Published cases approving knock and talks have grown legion. So the courts, they put their hands over their eyes and they say, well, he consented to let the police in. You go the next step. Why? Why would anybody consent to let 5 people that you don't know from the government go in your house and look through it? No, why would anybody do that?
Let me play the role of a judge for a minute, because I can do this pretty good. Counselor, what part of the officer's testimony didn't you understand? He just testified that he had permission to go in the house.
He waved us in. Offered us cookies and tea. I mean, we've heard it all, haven't we? And I'm like, no, that did not happen. That does not happen. How about if 5 people that I don't know who are civilians come to my door and say, can we come in and look around? How likely it is that you're going to say yes?
Get the fuck out of here.
Who would say yes to that? So why on earth are you going to say yes to 5 people that you don't know? Because they're police officers and have guns. That's why, and you're afraid of what they're going to do.
And literally, they have no problems threatening to toss your house and literally to take it apart nail by nail, looking for what they're looking for, within certain parameters.
Okay, what I wrote down here is, and I had this thought. A while back, we talked about this issue on college campuses of Title IX and how sexual harassment, sexual assault is like a big subject. It's a big deal now.
It's its own industry now.
And did they pass that law in Connecticut where on college campuses you have to, if the woman or the man doesn't affirmatively consent to have sex, then it's rape, right? There's got to be affirmative.
It's prima facie for rape.
There's got to be affirmative consent. You know, I mean, there should be some rule like that with police officers wanting to search people's property.
I just have to say something to you, Rachel. Mike Tyson got arrested, tried, and convicted for rape because somebody went up to his hotel room with him, and I guess they had sex, and she claimed it was rape. And way back then, now you can imagine how many years ago that was. I said, you know something? You have to carry little permission cards in your wallet, and when you're having dinner, you lean over and say, here, would you please sign this? Well, what's this? This is permission for me to have sex with you.
But see, that would not work, because if you go by Title IX on college campuses, consent can be withdrawn at any time.
Oh, yeah.
Without even verbalizing it.
Oh, yeah.
Consent can just stop.
I can think how that could.
But I don't want to go far. I don't want to go far down that road, Ed. That's not why I brought it up. I was trying to make a comparison, and I really think to call the bluff on this whole consent sham, and I think it is a sham. Officers should have to call your house first and make an appointment to come around.
If they're going to rely on permission.
Now, you know what? If there's exigent circumstances, they don't need a warrant. They can come. So if there's not exigent circumstances and they don't have a warrant, call to make an appointment. Otherwise, who believes this? That people just let people they don't know into their house to look around? Let's try it, Ed. Let's go knock on some doors tomorrow and say, can we come in your house and look around? Do you consent to that? I bet they would call the police on us. Don't you think? If you went around to people's doors saying, can I just come in and look around?
Absolutely.
They'd call the police.
Matter of fact, I think I've done that.
The police do things that people would call the police about if the people doing it weren't police.
I was a young married individual.
Come on, that was a good sentence. You don't recognize it? That was good. Okay, go ahead.
I was a young married person living in town housing in Wethersfield, and I was having some linoleum repaired in the kitchen. So the Pandolf floor covering truck was in the driveway. And I'm in the kitchen, and I'm talking to the mechanic from Pandolf's who's doing the work. And all of a sudden, I sense somebody in back of me. And I turn around, and I have to tell you, there was a man of Southwest Asian descent, either Hindu, Muslim, or whatever, looked like he came from India. And I turned around, and I said, excuse me, who are you? And he said, oh, I'm the town's new building inspector. I said, yeah? I said, what are you doing in my house? He says, well, I saw the truck out front, and I figured somebody may be doing some work without a permit, so I came in to see what's going on. Now, understand something. I got off the Wethersfield Police Department November 1st, 1971, and this had to be January of 1972, like 3 months after I got off the police department. I turned around to this person and said, you are the new town of Wethersfield building inspector? He says, that's right. He said, wait right there. Just stand right there. And I picked up the phone and I called the Wethersfield town manager's office. Now, I'm not an employee anymore.
When was this? In the 70s?
I got let go from Wethersfield on November 1st.
I was just trying to confirm.
This was January.
I was just trying to confirm.
January 1972.
Right.
I called up the town manager's office. And he didn't know who I was calling. And I said, did you hire a new building inspector? Since when can they walk into somebody's fucking house without a warrant, walk right through the house into the back kitchen looking for me doing something wrong?
Well, you consented.
Yeah. I said, well, I'm going to put him on the phone. You tell him that I'm an ex-Wethersfield policeman and that I got my fucking service revolver and he don't get the fuck out of here, I'm going to shoot his ass. And I hung up and I handed him the phone. 10 seconds. Hung up the phone and ran out to his car and took off. True story. Who the fuck are you? You're in my house. I'm the building inspector. Like, I got a right to come in here and see what's going on.
Yeah,
this is not India.
It's just such a myth that people all over the United States invite strangers into their house to look around. But that's apparently what...
No, look.
Come on in and look around my house.
We talked the other day about the dash cam video of Chief Jimmy Citran taking down the shoplifting suspect on the South State Highway. Great video. Go rah rah. You were here when I called up Jimmy and said, great video, Jimmy. Now, Nobody supports law enforcement more than I do. Nobody wants to support government more than I do. But I ain't going to support bad law enforcement. I'm not going to support bad government and bad government officials. I'm not going to do it. Just won't do it. I do make exceptions. I do make exceptions when the President of the United States is on a learning curve, and we elected him to be different. He is different.
Well,
okay.
let me put it this way. How many police officers, when they're at home, and 5 police officers they don't know show up at their house, or maybe they do know them, and they want to come look through their house, would say, yeah, come on in and look through my house? I have a feeling police officers like the privacy of their house as well. So they should understand it as well. Okay, what else do you want to talk about? Because I wanted to go through this case, but we can finish up what you got over there.
Without mentioning names or situations, you had an opportunity to question a number of people in the public safety field.
I don't want to talk about that yet.
Here's what I want to talk about.
I don't want to talk about it. It's not over. It's still ongoing. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
I don't.
Then I'll talk about something totally different.
Okay.
You know, these goddamn people that use their cell phones on the job are going to get jammed up.
Well, what's happening is...
Here we go. We can talk about this topic.
And practice has not caught up with technology. I think departments don't know how to handle it. Police departments are allowing or ignoring the use by officers of their private cell phones to conduct business. And you can have an officer testify on the stand all he wants that he doesn't use his cell phone during business hours. He's the exception, I'll put it that way, because everybody uses their cell phones all the time. And there is a lot of communication of a business and law enforcement nature that should be available to defendants, to defense attorneys, to supervisors, to everybody, because it has to do with police business that's not getting put in the official record because it's on officers' cell phones, text messages, voicemails. And you know, people talk about Hillary Clinton and what happened with her, but that's a problem everywhere that needs to be dealt with.
That was by design and by choice. She knew because of the Whitewater emails. She, at one time, her and Bill said, we'll never use email again.
Right.
Well, they found a way to get around it.
But I'll let you talk about this issue because you're passionate about it, but that's the framing of it.
Okay, well, let me just say this.
There needs to be a law.
Okay, again, early 1970s, I'm a Wethersfield policeman, and we're talking on a radio frequency that bounces up off the ionosphere and comes back down and does whatever. And there's a thing in radio communications called skip, where every once in a while somebody on the same frequency, they may be talking in Texas, but the atmosphere has it and it comes across on your radio, right? Can you imagine having 2 black suspects in the back of the car and hearing a Mississippi Sheriff's Department talking about the type of people that are fishing off the bridge and you have to tell them to move, and that word, the N-word, comes out over your radio and you turn around and you got to go like this? It wasn't me. Now, having said that, the reason that public safety communications are recorded, the reason we spent billions of dollars to record communications, the heartbeat system in Hartford and all of this CAD system that's going on, is so that there is a permanent record of as many facets of the call as possible so that there's no gaps in information. Everything is documented. And then all of a sudden, the cell phone finds its way into the government vehicle, finds its way into the fire trucks, the police trucks, and the ambulances. And rather than talk about the shit they're going to talk about that's highly inappropriate on a public radio frequency, they're doing it on cell phones. Well, give me a call. I'll explain to you.
Right.
And now there's no record of, and this again is to control the narrative. But I just wanted to say that, you know, this is becoming a very, very serious issue as far as civil rights go.
Police business is being conducted on the private cell phones of police officers. And what do you do about it?
And before you go on to your, this is curtilage, right?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
But
well,
I don't have to go on to this. It doesn't matter. I'm not in any hurry.
Let me finish like this.
Yep, go ahead.
The Journal-Enquirer made a Freedom of Information request to the Connecticut State Police for the internal affairs investigations where in excess of one, two, or three, or four state troopers, not realizing that they were recording themselves on the quote-unquote suspect's phone, discussed openly amongst themselves how to fabricate a charge, the justification and need to fabricate a charge to cover the ass so we don't get in trouble, and then to say we'll falsify the record by saying that people were complaining to us about him carrying a gun. All of that was done with the intent that no one would know about it except the four troopers standing there on the road. Well, now the whole goddamn internet knows about it. Mike Picard's audio tape. So you sit there and you go, you actually hear the troopers fabricating evidence, fabricating complaints, doing all kinds of shit. And now they're sitting there saying, because of 1-214 of the Connecticut General Statutes and because of a collective bargaining agreement with the police union, we can't release that information until the FOIC tells us to. And the FOIC for 40 years has said that internal affairs records are not to be considered personnel files for that section because the public's right to know about wrongdoing clearly outweighs everything else. You know, there's a scale thing. But the state police are going to dig their heels in and make somebody go to an FOI hearing. And you know something? The FOI will probably cave on this one too.
Why wouldn't the state police do that? What is the downside for them
None.
doing that? There's none.
We've talked about that.
There's no downside.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that, you know, I've had a very...
But good job, Journal-Enquirer, because they're the ones following the complaint and
Yep.
pushing the issue. And when you can't give up just because the other side uses delay tactics and has a lot more power and resources. You just got to keep at it. So good job, Mike Picard. Good job, Journal-Enquirer. Keep it up. And ACLU, Attorney Sostre. Good job.
Good. Okay, now, if Master Control puts the camera on you, I'm going to sit right here next to you, but I think that you're undivided.
No, don't do that.
Okay, never mind.
Why?
Okay, go ahead.
Because you know what? Sometimes when I watch the show, well, not that I do it that often, please. I mean, I'm on the show, but your expressions are kind of interesting when I'm, reading along. And I haven't prepared this case this much. I mean, what else do you have on the list? I don't want to... Curtilage, use of cell phones, leaks from leftovers. What's that? I don't know.
I am getting concerned about the number of leftover bureaucrats at the national level who are leaking information to take down the current administration.
Well, this is where his lack of political experience hurts him.
Right.
It's just like if all you have is experience in government service and you go into corporations and business, it's a total change. You're going to be at a disadvantage. Doesn't matter how good your intentions are, how smart you are. It doesn't. It's just a huge change. And I think would have been too much to expect of any human being to go in there with no political experience. I mean, John McCain is a master of politics. Does that make him somebody to be admired? I don't know. Being a master of politics, is that a great thing? I don't know. Maybe to some people it is. I think but without that, Donald Trump's going to have trouble. There's no doubt about it.
Well, you know something? I anticipated that he would have these kind of issues.
And you know, people.
But I
challenge.
elected him to do what he does and to change the rules and to not conform and to say whatever the hell he wants to say, you know, and take it as fake news, real opinion, real policy, not policy. Goddamn man can say anything he wants to say.
So what brought this up? Did any particular event this week make you think that?
No, I'm just, you know, the Mueller has impaneled the grand jury. That's fine, you know. Look at all this shit, but I'll tell you, this is a witch hunt to take down Donald Trump's administration, and it will receive bilateral support because there are Russians. I mean, not Russians. Yeah, there's Russians. There are Democrats,
Where are the Russians?
Democrats and Republicans who don't want him in the White House because the game is
because he upsets the natural order that the Republicans and Democrats both benefit from.
Well, let me tell you. Let me just tell you. You know, I'm laughing. Donald Trump has, in the first, I guess, 6 months of his administration, over 1 million jobs added to the U.S. economy. Now, maybe they're all minimum wage jobs, but there's 1 million jobs, statistically, 1 million jobs have been added to the economy. Well, okay, maybe it's not the highest paying jobs, maybe it's 1 million jobs. Didn't lose any, 1 million jobs. And the Dow is over 2,200. Now, that doesn't mean shit for the person who's not in the market. It doesn't mean shit for the person who doesn't have any stock or didn't put their money into a...
Well, unless the people who have money in the market and do those kind of things benefit and it trickles down to people that don't.
Right. What I'm saying is he's appointed federal judges. And I forgot
He's
how
ahead
many...
of Obama on doing that. At the same point in time when Obama went in, Trump is way ahead of him on nominating judges.
I want to say they approved 70 federal appointments, some of which were judges to the district court and appellate court.
Wow.
But he's got 150 or so, between 125 and 150 vacancies in the federal judiciary, judges that he has to fill. Maybe you ought to send in a resume or something.
Yeah, that's how you do it. You just send in
Bring
a
me
resume.
along as your clerk.
Apply online.
Bring me along as your clerk.
that would be the reason they would have me. Well, probably some others too.
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, I said, you know, leaks by leftovers. There's people who are entrenched in their bureaucratic jobs who are not happy with what's going on, and there are people that are doing whatever they have to do to undermine their president. And I ain't happy with it. So go ahead, your turn.
Well, do you want to do this? We can probably make a discussion of it along the way, right?
Do what?
Go over this case.
Let's go.
Okay, United States versus Shannon Calhoun. Federal criminal case. The defense attorney moved to suppress evidence, and Judge Underhill granted that motion to suppress evidence, which basically means usually the case gets dropped because if it's a drug case or a gun case and the government's not allowed to bring the drugs or the guns into evidence, then there is no case, right? So a motion to suppress, if you win it, is sometimes dispositive of the entire case. So let me give you some facts here, Ed. April 13th, 2016.
Now, we do this when we're not on the air also.
Oh, yeah.
When we'll be sitting in a conference room, it's okay, well, let me give you some facts, Ed. And then everybody in the room, if it's only me or there's other, everybody's supposed to start thinking outside the box about how does this...
Well, there's just a comment that Judge Underhill makes in here that I found.
Set it up.
So I want to set it up. So this is a pretty recent case, right? And several Bridgeport police officers. Now, this is how you kind of know in what direction a judge is going sometimes when you read the first sentence. So I wish I hadn't told you what his decision was, because from this first sentence I would ask you to guess. But let me read the first sentence. On the evening on October 13, 2016, several Bridgeport police officers breached the apartment where Shannon Calhoun was staying without first obtaining a warrant. Which way do you think that case is going? Breached the apartment. Somewhat of a negative connotation.
Right.
He doesn't say they were invited in.
No, they slammed their way in. They breached their way in.
They assert that their otherwise unlawful entry was justified by exigent circumstances. While they were in the apartment, they identified various amounts of contraband, including a gun, a large amount of cash, and a baggie of what appeared to be cocaine. They arrested him and then later obtained a search warrant for the apartment on the basis of the contraband they had identified. A subsequent search pursuant to the warrant uncovered firearms, ammunition, quantities of various controlled substances, and other indicia that Calhoun was involved in the drug trade. And so the federal government indicted him. And here's where we're going to get to the part where we learn why the officers appeared at that apartment that night. And it has to do with reports of gunfire. And Judge Underhill is going to address the fact that the mere presence of guns, or even of shots fired, doesn't necessarily lead to the conclusion of exigent circumstances, which is something we agree with and something we argue all the time. So it's about 10:16 p.m., April 13th, and two people called 911 to report 911, to report shots fired in the vicinity of a CVS in Bridgeport. There was a second caller that said there was a woman in the parking lot, had broken the window of her car using a gun. Around the same time, an off-duty police officer called to report that he heard shots fired. And so the bottom line is, I think the guy who was responsible for kicking in the... breaching the door and everything, led the officers on a chase. And when the officers found the suspect at his apartment, he was pounding on the door of the residence. They either chased him there in the car or chased him there on foot. And when they found this person that they suspected of punching in the window of the car, he was pounding on the door of the residence. The cop viewed drops of blood inside the car and on the sidewalk, and shortly thereafter asked the sergeant for permission to breach the residence. He stated there was blood leading from the BMW to the residence, a possible injured party inside, and he thought that he had exigency. He breached the door, entered with a K-9 unit, and then they conducted a protective sweep of the residence. What's that?
That's a search.
Make sure that there's nobody else around, or...
You're searching for somebody else.
Okay. And I guess there was some conflicting testimony from the government witnesses regarding the precise sequence of the sweep. We've run into that too, where you have...
The narrative got out of control.
Yeah, where the narrative kind of goes all over the place and you don't know what to believe.
And one narrative on this document doesn't match the narrative on that document, doesn't match the narrative on that document. And this one says listen to the other two, but the other two don't match the one that's saying to listen to. Yeah.
So, you have two affidavits from 2016 where the police officers are saying they were in somebody's yard, and then all of a sudden in 2016 when the judge says, well, that's a really important fact that they were in the yard. So in 2017 the officers fill out two more affidavits saying, wait a second, we weren't in the yard. And so then you have an affidavit, we were in the yard, and an affidavit, we weren't in the yard, and you don't know which set of facts you're arguing against. So it does happen. It does happen. Confusion does happen. Okay, so let me skip to that. And then he goes into a lot of details of the facts. But basically, the defendant challenged the government's evidence. First, that the entrance into the residence was not justified by the exigent circumstances exception to the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement.
Go ahead.
Now, what exception is there to the what exception is there to the exigency exception to the Fourth Amendment warrant requirement, Ed? There's an exception to the exception. Do you remember that?
Yes, if it was caused by, if the department that's going to do the search caused the incident that started the whole thing down that road. In other words, I'll say it again. If I shoot somebody through the picture window in his living room and he hits the floor, and I go in saying there's an injured man in the house, the only reason he's injured is because I shot him.
So you can't create the exigency and then enter based on that exigency, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
They're just making it more confusing, and then there'll be some carve out of that, and it's the rabbit hole.
So they're claiming there was an exigency because the gentleman who had been pounding on the window and stuff may have been hurt. They were there to help him. They needed to go in. Second, if the officers were lawfully on the premises, their search nevertheless exceeded the scope of a permissible protective sweep. So the defendant is saying, you know what, if I lose on the exigency, Judge, and you say there was exigency, then I'm going to say the sweep's too large. And third, that the contraband items described in the warrant were not found pursuant to the plain view doctrine. So the officers, this is what the defendant's saying, the officers are claiming they saw stuff there that they really didn't see, but they kind of guessed is probably there. So then they went back and got a warrant saying, we need to go, search and seize that stuff. And then lo and behold, it turned out the stuff was there. So he has three different arguments. We're not going to get to the last two because the judge is going to find that there was no exigency. Contrary to the government's suggestion, the Fourth Amendment does not create a per se exception to the warrant requirement anytime there is a report of shots fired nearby, even if the police believe they have located the person responsible for firing those shots. In every case, the totality of the circumstances must be examined. In other words, just because it's a gun, we don't throw out the Fourth Amendment. We still use the same standard. Totality of the circumstances. Right, Ed?
I'll tell you.
Right? Doesn't it feel good to read a decision like this?
It does.
The Harris v. O'Hare, John Schoenhorn's case, out of the Second Circuit, the one where the officers went over the fence because they thought there were two guns in a parked car, and they killed the dog. Second Circuit found that they didn't have any right to go inside that fence. And in saying that, Second Circuit said, the mere suspicion or probable cause for belief of the presence of a firearm does not on its own create urgency. The mere fact that there's a gun doesn't make the situation urgent. We still respect the Fourth Amendment even when somebody says the word gun. In cases holding that a report of shots fired provided sufficient exigency to justify a warrantless entry, the officers had an objectively reasonable belief that victims would be found at that location because that was where the shots had been fired. Okay? So there you go. That was the first thing I wanted to point out. Now then there's another exception to the warrant requirement called the emergency aid exception. Now, if you want to move on to something else, if you're bored with this, let me know.
No, I need to get up and walk around for a while.
You've fallen asleep.
I am falling asleep.
Oh. You want to cut the show early tonight?
I do want to cut the show early.
Why don't we do that?
Because
you know what?
I gotta drive. Yeah.
I have somebody here that's tired as well.
Yep. Got to go home.
Yep.
To a new home.
Now, is Master Control watching so they'll know we're going to shut the...
Sky? Yeah, but we're going to close it down early.
So everybody join us Monday?
Yeah, I'll figure this out. But I'm just, I've had a really long week.
Well, and the Goodwill thing couldn't have been,
that was stressful.
Helpful. That's very stressful driving back and forth. Oh, I guess we already said goodbye.
Sitting here the dog over there is hypnotizing me. She's laying there.